We are live again. What amazing sessions we had today. I am really touched and I'm honored to have all of these coaches and speakers with me on this virtual stage. I hope that you are also enjoying it. Don't hesitate to comment or ask questions because they are here for you. Our last guest today is Michael Harris. Michael is a #1 best-selling author, teacher, trainer, entrepreneur, and co-founder of Endless Stages, an organization intensely focused on helping authors, coaches, experts, entrepreneurs get their message out to the world. Michael's first gig at 6 years old was the Blackberry entrepreneur. He's helped his clients generate well over $40 million in sales. In his spare time, he explores locations deep down into the mountains near his home in Central Oregon. Welcome, Michael. Thank you so much for being today with me.
Thank you, Diana. It's really wonderful to be here. And as I mentioned earlier, I've listened to some of the previous coaches and presenters, and it's just been a really great show. So I'm really pleased to be here, and thank you for inviting me.
I'm honored to have you, and today we are going to talk us about what Blackberries teach us about being an entrepreneur. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Diana. One of the things that I believe right now in the world with our whole speaking and our whole talking is that there's so many people in the world who can't speak out, whose voices aren't even allowed to be heard in the world today. So I'm extremely passionate about helping people get their stories out, regardless of what it is, out into the world, because we have freedoms here. And the more that we are able to get our stories out, the more it's going to help everybody on the planet. And so, again, I'm just so passionately intense on that, So I want to lead with that right away. So the stories, again, are so important. One of the things that I've learned over the years, I've read many, many books, every book you can imagine, I've read, thousands of books, however many books I've read, and I've learned a lot. One of the things that I discovered, and I heard many years ago, just randomly, that instead of always listening to other people's stories, reading other people's books, to really understand yourself, you need to write your own. You need to write your own stories. You need to be able to reveal what's inside of you to have an understanding of you. I read books, audio books, written books, everything. So they're all good. But that little idea that got planted in me, that seed many years ago, changed everything. So I started writing down my stories. And one of the things that you mentioned is that I'm an entrepreneur. The last job that I had was in 1994. I was working for a small publishing and training company. We put together mostly health and wellness type trainings for HR departments, all around the world. So the company was bought out by a larger company, and we had sat down and we had negotiated. I was the assistant controller at the time. And the owner of the company, I won't tell you how much he got. He got a lot of money, right? And I'm sitting in the back room. I'd helped negotiate it, and I was managing the credit lines, doing all these different things. And I was thinking, okay, is he going to give us a little bonus of something as a result of the efforts? Nothing. And I thought, well, this isn't right. I helped this guy make all this money, which is good, right? But, maybe there should be some rewards to all the employees. So I put in my notice after the sale went through. I put in a 60-day notice, and I left, and I never went back. And that was really, although I had entrepreneurial type ventures, and I'm going to get to the Blackberry story itself, I realized that if I was going to really self-realize myself, self-actualize myself. If I was going to really do what I wanted to do in the world, I needed to take charge of my own life, of my own business, of what I do in my life. So as time went on, I started discovering some stories in my life. You mentioned I wrote a book. Here's the book, Falling Down, Getting Up, right? And then I also co-authored another book with Rick Frischman, Expert Success Solutions. I'm one of the contributing authors of that book. And in this Falling Down, Getting Up book is really the story of first as a child, 1971, I was in a massive water skiing accident, had 60% of my liver removed, coma, it took me a long time, over a year, to recover from that particular accident. And then later on, I'm talking about how I almost got my legs cut off from vascular disease. I could barely walk. And again, all that's in the book. I won't get into all of that right now because there's so much other ideas that I want to cover. But the reason I mention this is because the writing of that book helped me understand better my stories and who I am, right? So as I mentioned before about that writing down of our own stories. And I also realized later on that by writing the stories the way that I did, the falling down, getting up, overcoming adversity, the transformation is all good, that I also recognized that I was overlooking a lot of stories, a lot of really great stories. And stories are so important for not only ourselves, but to help other people. If there's a story, that I can relate to somebody, that I can share with somebody that can help them, then that's good. I mean, for instance, like Kevin, he was talking a lot about happiness and joy in life and trusting his gut. And, Jen was talking about stories around strategies, and Pete was talking about the 5 Ps. So each one of those stories that was being shared, somebody different may enjoy, say, Pete's stories more, maybe Jen's story, maybe Kevin, maybe somebody liked all of them, but they were able to potentially realize their own stories. So I went back and I looked at more of the stories in my life. And one of the things that I discovered as I was growing up, my dad was an entrepreneur. He was in business for himself. He owned a number of gas stations. As a kid, he had about 50 gas stations. He had more later on, but younger, he had a number of gas stations. He sold gasoline and heating oil, mostly in the state of Oregon, but that grew too. One of the things that Dad always related was, if you're going to sell something somebody needs, that they want, right? So one of the things that I loved to do as a kid, we had some property and we had a lot of blackberries on the property. So I would go back into our back field where all the blackberries were, and I would just like eat them as much as I could. And our friends or neighbors, they would come over, they would eat it. And I would come home, covered with blackberries, right? And Mom was go, "Oh, you're covered with blackberries again." And I said, "Yeah." And I said, "All my friends like them too." And we had the biggest blackberry bushes in the neighborhood, in the area. And, Mom would make these blackberry pies and we'd put the ice cream on top. And it was just like, we'd eat blackberry pies all the time. And the neighbor kids would come over and they'd want it too. And they'd say, "Can Mrs. Harris," talking to my mom, "can we take some of these home too?" And, Mom would do that a few times. And then I said to Mom, I said, "Mom," I said, "Dad likes to sell things to other people and make money. What if I go out in the field, pick the blackberries, you make the pies, and I'll go around the neighborhood and sell them?" And she said, oh, great idea. So we made a little deal. I was 6 years old, right? I would go pick the blackberries. She would make the pie. I would charge $1. I go to door. And, when the Girl Scouts came, I'm just going to go down this rabbit hole just for a moment. When the Girl Scouts came along, they taught people to say, not, do you want to buy a box of cookies, but how many boxes of cookies do you want to buy, right? So I started doing that. We'd sell them for $1. I had to give my mom 50 cents. I had to split it with her, right? I had to give her 50 cents. And so I'd go around the neighborhood and I would sell these pies, and people were buying them. And, I could then go down to the what was called the drugstore at the time. It was a long time ago in the 60s. And you could buy, comic books and candy and, all those things. So I realized early on that if I did this, I could raise some money. I could go buy these things, right? So my parents, I didn't really get an allowance. I made my own money over the years. I even bought and sold used lawnmowers at one point. I mean, I did whatever I could. I didn't like newspapers because I didn't want to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and deliver newspapers. My friends were doing that. I didn't want to do that. So the reason I mentioned the Blackberry entrepreneur story again is in storytelling, you can go back and identify stories in your life. And there's a framework that the entertainment industry will often use in creating stories. And it's something that really came about more through my partner, Sean Tyler Foley. He really related this to me. I'd been doing a lot of training, but in different ways, teaching. And he was doing it, because he grew up in the entertainment industry. So one of the things that they do is to develop a story, and the listeners in the audience, please pay attention. You can write this down because this is a great way to bring out your own stories. So what you do is you take your life, and just for an example today, let's say you're 50 years old. You divide your life by 5, and then you have 10 different periods. And if you're 51, you just drop down to 50, divide by 5, because it's hard to divide 51 by 5, right? You're going to get like 10.2 or something. But so now you have 5 10-year periods. And then you go, like, you can make little columns, and then you go and you write down your most vivid memories from each one of those time periods. And then you go back and go, okay, why was this vivid to me? So I've done this exercise, right? And there are stories in there that I've never brought out. They're still written down in my framework, but more other stories were more vivid, whether it was the Blackberry, whether it was selling lawnmowers, whether it was catching a line drive in Little League baseball and winning the game. And, starting to bring those different stories out that I never thought of as stories, right? So then you write down the lessons you learn, and then really the details that support the lesson. So again, you do your time periods, most vivid memories, why those were most vivid, and the lessons you learned, and really the details that support that. So what you then have is like the Blackberry entrepreneur story. You can go back, you can create that story. Why was it vivid? The lessons that I learned from that, the details that support that. My friend Les Brown, are you familiar with Les Brown? So Les Brown, one of the things that he loves to say is never tell a story without a point, and never tell a point without a story, right? And I love that. So just briefly, I'll give it another example. I spoke on stage just a little bit before the COVID came out with Les, and one of the stories I was talking about was taking a quantum leap. And this is important because I believe that we already have everything we need within. It's just learning how to use it. And so nature teaches us about quantum leaps. You know, there's a great northern owl in Africa that can transform itself. It's called the transformer owl. So anybody could Google that and look at it a little bit more and see what it does. There's the chameleon, which can change its colors really quickly, the octopus, some other animals. The sea cucumber, most of them can go from being really soft to really hard. If a predator comes along, tries to bite it, it's more like a rock, so it's hard to bite it, right? You know, it does some other things, which I won't get into today, but nature gives us those examples of quantum leaps, right? One of the things that story does for us, especially revealing our own stories, is gives us an opportunity to have an aha moment, a quantum leap in our thinking of what we're capable of doing, of what our understanding of the world is, and how perhaps our stories and our ideas may help somebody else. Because for me, that's the point of stories. We, over the eons, you know, thousands of years ago, I'm circling around, I don't know if you can see it, people used to sit around campfires and tell their stories. And knowledge and experience was transferred through those fire stories, as I call it, right? They would just sit around and tell their stories. And today, you know, I grabbed another book. Now, there are books that I really like, and this is one of them. It's called Winning the Story Wars by Jonas Sachs. This is an incredible book about understanding the nature of stories and how to relate them today in our business and our life. So the framework that I was just talking about, those particular stories, we can use them not only for our, like, say, a book, we can use those same stories on stage, on a podcast, we can use the same stories on our websites, our emails, whatever it is that helps support the journey that we're on and helping to support the journey that we want our clients to take. So the understanding of those stories is really important. And I'll just mention one more thing, and then if there's any questions or any thoughts, let's go there. My brother was one of the co-authors of the book, The Secret. Many people have heard of it. You may have heard of it too. When Rhonda Byrne wrote that book, she came to my brother and my brother helped her put the book together and everything else. And a lot of people like to throw rocks at the book, right? We get lots of rocks thrown at us for different reasons, which is fine because, you know, it shows who likes something, who doesn't like something, and it's all okay. But the secret is really about the law of attraction. And that's why people were throwing rocks on it, because they thought that the book was saying you just need to sit on your couch and dream something up and it's going to fall out of heaven and you're going to have it. Well, that's not what the book is about. Yes, it says you have to create what you want. You have to idealize it. First, it starts in the mind and then it becomes physical. But there's another law that John Assaraf came up with that he talked about the book, and he was one of the participants in that book as well. And the book, or the law, is the law of Goya. I don't know, Diana, if you've heard that term before, and a lot of people haven't, but the law of Goya, Goya, is get off your ass. So the only way isn't that great?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you actually, to trigger the law of attraction, you have to get up off your ass and actually do something, right? So what I would invite any listener or the audience that may be hearing this is, you know, take some time, stay seated. If you want to stand up, you can. Write your stories out. Find out what's inside of you, revealing what's inside of you, that may be able to be of help to other people. I believe our stories right now, again, it's vital to get them out, not in a year, not in a month, but today. Even if the story is one-on-one with a friend that needs support or love, or something, we can, share our experience with somebody else, in a way that can be helpful. Again, whether it's one-on-one or whether it's speaking on stage or a podcast or anywhere else, getting stories out can change the world. It does change the world. We see it every day. All we have to do is watch the news to see how it's changed. But I like that the last 3-minute segments where they have a feel-good story. Wouldn't it be great if we had, in a 30-minute newscast, 27 minutes of feel-good and maybe 3 minutes of some of the other stuff that, we're still figuring out. So
Thank you so much.
Diana, that's, again, you got to cut me off or I'll keep on talking.
I love this. I love this and everything that you are sharing with us. And I fully agree with you. And I am really looking forward to a world where we are going to see all of these stories in the press, on TV, instead of all the negative things that we are seeing nowadays. I am really looking forward. I don't know if this is going to happen whilst I am alive, but I am really hope for that. And I would like to ask you, because I know that sometimes maybe, I don't know if these are excuses or if we don't know how to really pull that story out of us. Maybe you are thinking, I am not good at writing, I am not good with words, I don't want to put my story out there because it's personal and maybe other people are going to make fun of it. How do we handle all of this?
Well, there's about 7 questions in there, I think.
Okay.
And they're all, it's all really great questions. And I know for me, again, sharing some of my experience, when I wrote this book, Falling Down, Getting Up, I wrote some very personal things in there. And initially, it was really, really uncomfortable for me to share. And I had to talk to somebody about, should I really put this story in there? Should I really talk about that? And one of the things that Rick he was one of my publishers, and he's the one that I contributed in the other book, The Expert Success Solutions. One of the things that Rick said is, the more personal you can become about your story, the more connection you will have with another person. And that was really strong for me. Now, there was a mix when I wrote this book. Part of it I wrote down physically. I sat down, and I say this book took 10 years and 79 days to write, because it was up here for 10 years. I'd written some things out, but I made a commitment one day that I was going to get it done in 90 days. And believe it or not, I'd go to the coffee shop. I was the guy in the corner a dozen years ago with this cup of coffee or cup of tea. And I would write for 2 hours and then I'd leave. But my only focus was that. I wasn't at home. I wasn't doing laundry. I wasn't, doing anything else. My only focus was that. Now, some people will record it. You could even, with your phone, with your iPhone, you could record what you're thinking and then have it transcribed. And that can be very powerful, because the way that we talk is often the way that our stories come out best in writing, right? I think I answered 2 of the 7 questions you asked.
I have to admit, I don't know what are the 7. Definitely there are 7 interpretations. Thank you so much, Michael. Thank you very much for all of this. And I really believe that everyone should put their stories out there. And do you think that if we start writing our stories, whether it's in a blog or a book or whatever format we are choosing for, do you think that this can actually help our business to grow?
Oh, absolutely. Because as you start to write your stories, first identifying them and being clear about what stories are going to perhaps trigger the person that you want to do business with. You know, I got a wall up here and I have my avatars printed out and I have a long story about my avatar and a picture of them, right? So by using stories, I am going to be attracting a certain type of person, a coach, a author, an expert, an entrepreneur that, you know, makes this much money a year, lives here, does all this. So by putting these stories on our blogs and everything else, we are going to naturally attract that person. They're going to be attracted to our business.
I love that. I never thought about it, but indeed you mentioned the law of attraction, and I also fully believe in it. And I know that it goes kind of both ways. When you think about something negative, it's going to happen, but also when you think about something positive.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Michael, for being today with me. I am honored to have you on this show, and I really learned a lot from you. And I'm looking forward to staying connected with you.
Thank you. And if I can mention briefly,
yes,
anybody can join our Endless group or Endless Stages group for free, just endlessstages.com. And once you join, you also get a free membership site that tells you how to do your stories and how to speak and get over nervousness, etc. So anybody can opt in there and receive that absolutely free.
I love that. Thank you so much, Michael.
You're welcome. Thank you, Diana.